What's going on? I am back
Is there
from the depths of Russia, wrestling salmon with my bare hands. I am back. My 3 week absence is now over. I don't even remember how many weeks it's been.
It's been a while.
My absence is over. It's been a while. It's been a while. We had, my goodness, a crazy past couple of weeks here. But thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. It is Lucas and Tyler hanging out with you tonight. Cameron is unable to join us, unfortunately, and I think it's because he heard I was back this week. And he said, I've been carrying the hosting duties too much recently, and I need a vacation. And so I said, I get it. I get it, man. Not everybody can carry the weight of this podcast. I'm just kidding. Tyler, how's it going tonight?
Oh, it's a good night so far.
It is.
Nothing against Cam at all, but we've got our regular host back. So, I mean,
great to be here. Great to be back.
And I have a weird suspicion that he didn't want to have any beef while we were recording about like who's the better fisherman, because like you said, you were just in Russia catching salmon with your bare hands, fighting off grizzly bears, right? Like he can't compete with that. So he's taking the week off to come up with a better story that proves that he's a better fisherman than you are.
I buy that. He didn't tell me that, but it wouldn't. It sounds like you're leaking a news story there potentially.
May or may not have a very unreliable source.
My source was, trust me, bro. We're out here, evening of June 2nd. We'll get this pod out to you on Friday, June 3rd. We're looking forward to today's episode. We are coming up on the beginning of like peak fantasy season for us. So the next 2 weeks, we're going to wrap out our Dynasty rankings. Cameron and Tyler went over Dynasty running backs last week. We're going to do Dynasty, top 15 Dynasty wide receivers this week. And then next week, guess what? We're going back to 2 pods a week.
Yeah,
we're going back
let's
to 2
run
pods
it back.
a week.
Run it back.
Run it back. We are excited for this offseason. We've been discussing the schedule the past couple of weeks. It's going to be a ton of fun this offseason. We have a divisional breakdown starting, I believe, the week of June. Nope, not 15th, the week of June 20th. We're going to have a divisional breakdown for you every single week until August 8th. And we're going to mix in some other content in there as well. We're going to mix in some underrated players, some overrated players. We're going to mix in a ton of fun episodes in there too. Because last season, it seems like we just kind of clipped through. We took forever to do divisional breakdowns, and we spent a ton of time. We're like, you know what? We can handle it all in one episode. And we're just going to do one a week, and we're going to mix in some more content that we want to share with the people, including bringing on a few guests as well, which we are super stoked about. I won't reveal who our first guest is going to be quite yet. But I am looking forward to that. Maybe I'll spoil the episode topic. Think that's okay to do?
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Mock Draft 1.0. It's going to be done with one of our guests, and we are excited for that. That is going to be... I'm stoked for that episode. I'm stoked for the guest. It's going to be so much fun. So we have 2 episodes a week starting next week. We're going to wrap out our Dynasty rankings. We're going to get into some our first mock draft, then divisional breakdowns the week after. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. But we are talking about our top 15 Dynasty wide receivers tonight. But before we even get into that, question of the day to prime the pump for our listeners. This is something that I've been wrestling with a ton this offseason. And this actually was inspired by one of our followers on TikTok. I can get the @ here quick. But essentially, he had asked me, or he had put in our comments, what should I trade for Jamar Chase? Which, to me, I'm like the farm. Like, I'm only, like, if someone gives me their entire team, I'll trade Jamar Chase. And I don't even want someone else's entire team. I'm not trading Jamar Chase. But that led me to a different player to chew on. Because I, again, have been really curious about this player's value in Dynasty formats. how in the world do you value Cooper Kupp in Dynasty formats currently?
Ooh.
Coming off one of the most historic seasons for a wide receiver in arguably the most dynamic offense, but he's 29 years old. So, Tyler, get the wheels turning here. What's the value of Cooper Kupp in Dynasty formats right now?
I think there's a couple ways to look at this. One being you look at the age and you think ahead to when wide receivers will traditionally start to kind of fall off a little bit. And the one wide receiver that comes to mind right away is Julio Jones.
Yep.
Julio Jones, if I'm not mistaken, last year was 31, maybe even 32.
In terms of overall finish?
No, his age. What age he played at.
Yes, he was 31.
Age 30 and 31 is when we traditionally start to see wide receivers decline in terms of production.
Yep.
So you combine that then with the fact that his production last year was an all-time high, was, dare I say, unpredictable.
Unpredictable, I think, is a fair word. I wouldn't have guessed it would be that historic. If you would have told me Cooper Kupp has a chance to be a top 7 wide receiver in fantasy football, I probably would have bought it. If you would have made a really good argument. But, like, historic wide receiver 1, never would have guessed.
So, combining that then with the age, do you sell high right now? Because there's probably going to be at least one and probably 2 more seasons of solid, actually, I shouldn't say even solid, really good production because he's still the number 1 option in that offense.
Yeah.
So do you sell him high? And this is where it gets into the team building of fantasy football.
Of Dynasty specifically.
Yeah, exactly. If you're trying to rebuild, or you feel like you should rebuild, and like Cooper Kupp is like the one person that like you've always said like I'm not going to trade. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that it is the time to trade him.
It is the time to trade him. I 100% agree.
But if you're someone that is, competing year in, year out for championships, and you've got solid options waiting behind, sure, no one can truly replace Cooper Kupp, but you get pieces back, and the pieces that you already have can combine to what Cooper Kupp could produce. I think, then it's up to you. If you want to trade him, fine. But if you want to keep him, cool. I mean, you just try to maintain the production and the point value totals between all the players.
Yeah. The thing about Cooper Kupp is that I feel like he's really roster specific because well, here's an interesting piece of news that just came out. We're going to have to add to news and notes. Sorry, I got distracted by my phone. Sleeper update. You'll like it.
Oh my.
Cooper Kupp, very roster dependent. I myself, in our Dynasty League, I would consider myself a rebuilding team. All my pieces are, except for DeAndre Hopkins, are under the age of 26. I am I don't have a Devonte Adams, a Stephon Diggs, one of those stud players, a Derrick Henry, a Dalvin Cook. I don't have any of those guys. I am pretty much all youth. So for me to go out and give a first-round pick next year to acquire Cooper Kupp for my team doesn't make a ton of sense from a dynasty perspective, even though I think it would probably take at least a first to acquire Cooper Kupp, would it not?
Oh, at least.
At least, right. And I don't know if I would give up 2 firsts, but I would give up a first for sure, and I'd probably have to give that person a really strong wide receiver 2 in return. I'm trying to think of like a guy that's like 27. Would you? Here we go. Terry McLaurin and a first for Cooper Kupp. Would you do that?
If I was the person...
Oh, sorry. Terry McLaurin and a first for Cooper Kupp. I think I said Terry McLaurin for Cooper Kupp and a first. Terry McLaurin and a first for Cooper Kupp.
if I was the one selling Cooper Kupp, I would try to push for like a second round pick the year after. I don't think I would just do a 2 for 1. So you'd want an
additional.
Yeah, I would.
So you'd want an additional draft capital?
Probably more capital, because at that point we're getting real thin in terms of like what other player would someone want to give up in that package. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think at that point, but like the starting package would at least have to be Terry McLaurin and a first.
At least that's a start.
Yeah, I think that's the base I would seek. And it would be really tough to part with Cooper Kupp, but you have to remember you're also building for the future. If you're in like a win now team, like keep Cooper Kupp. Keep Cooper Kupp. There's no debate. Like if you're trying to win this year, don't trade him away. But if also you're like, Cooper Kupp's like my oldest player on my roster by 4 years, which would be astounding if you have all 25-year-old players on your roster. If you're in a spot, though, where you're like, okay, it's time to tear everything down, like that would be the starting point for Cooper Kupp, I think.
I agree.
And honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you sold Cooper Kupp for like a first-round pick and a guy like Treylon Burks, who's unproven.
I may even look for whoever has like Deontay Johnson, right? Because for whatever reason, it seems like people are just kind of falling off of Johnson. But like, if you can get Johnson in a first,
that's me. I'm those people.
Like, I think that's a great start compared to like a Terry McLaurin or Chris Godwin or someone like that.
Ooh, Chris Godwin would be an interesting one. I don't know if you can get a first and Godwin for Kupp, but that's an interesting one to think about. So, all that to say, Cooper Kupp's value is very dependent in Dynasty formats. I'm about to sneeze. Nope. As soon as I muted myself.
Nice. Oh.
There it is. I muted myself just in time to get that sneeze out.
I thought you were so proactive to, 1, block the sneeze, but 2, mute yourself, and then it came back again for round 2. And
it came back and it said, psych, and I still muted myself in time. All right, let's move on to news and notes so we can get to these Dynasty wide receivers. News and notes from around the league. Seattle would sign Baker Mayfield if he was cut, per report. How shocked are you?
We've been hearing...
This is me pretending to be shocked.
We've been hearing this for, months now?
Yeah. Would that actually help the value of guys like DK, Metcalf, Tyler Lockett? Quick answer. We don't have to break this down because it's not even happening yet, but...
I mean, we're comparing...
Would that help them in any way?
We're comparing Geno Smith and Drew Lock to Baker Mayfield, and I know Baker Mayfield's not special by any means, but he's definitely better than the guys that they have already, so yes.
I would agree. Paris Campbell, connecting with Matt Ryan in OTAs. I don't care.
It's OTAs.
It's OTAs. Michael Pittman still the wide receiver 1. Said Matt Ryan could put it wherever he wants to. Pause, and we are moving on. The backlash on that tweet was just... at least Michael Pittman had some fun with it. He quote tweeted it later and said, y'all know what I meant. But at least got a good laugh out of it. So, Kyla Murray back at Arizona's training facility and on the practice field after Cardinals resumed OTAs. This, I feel like, is news.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like this is important, right? Like, I made fun of Paris Campbell OTA with Matt Ryan thing, whatever, I could care less. But Kyla Murray being in the facility and not being a baby about his contract dispute right now, that is important, okay? I have, not that my fantasy confidence was really shaken on him for this year, but all of a sudden, my confidence in Kyla Murray for this year is rock solid. Like, he knows he has to play for that contract.
Yeah, I mean, it would be one thing if he was coming back at training camp, right? And then,
right,
because as they would get closer and closer, then you start to worry, oh, shoot. Hollywood Brown may not actually have his, college quarterback. But,
right.
No, like you said, it's OTAs, and for him to show up at OTAs really shows that he's starting to come around to the idea that like he has to play for his contract, and that he hasn't done enough so far to go, get his contract early.
Yep. Yeah. You got to at least play for that contract. Like, I don't think he's in a position to say, hey, I'm going to sit out until you give me my extension. Like, sorry, you had, like, literally probably the worst playoff loss I've seen, at least in the last 15 years, as long as I've been watching football. That was really bad. You got to earn that. So, I agree. I think that's big news for the Cardinals, big news for Kyla Murray. 23rd lawsuit officially filed against Deshaun Watson. We are a fantasy football podcast, not a judicial court of law podcast. I think I'll just leave it at that piece of news and move on. I don't think we need to discuss anything on that. I don't even want to do any speculating on that. But that is in the works. Naji Harris, up to 244 pounds from 230 coming into OTAs. He actually ended up quote tweeting that and saying he was at 240 going into camp last offseason. That reporters are just making stuff up. Because I originally sent this piece of news, and I was like, oh, so Naji ain't going to have as much shift anymore. And then he quote tweeted, he's like, I was at 240 last year. I'm like, oh, well, okay, maybe I'm not as worried anymore then, and you're just going to be a big old bruising power back anyways. Not quite Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry if he like had a bit lighter of feet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Najee will be fine. He'll get 300-plus touches. Easy. Probably 320 plus this year. And he'll be a top 7 option in fantasy. So
Dare I say, fade all the people say to avoid Naji Harris. Like, yeah, that's right. I don't want to have a guy on my fantasy team that averages at least 30 touches a game. Like, I don't want that.
That's the thing. Like, his efficiency may be piss poor. Like, he may be below 4 yards per carry again this year. I don't care. Like, even if he gets half the receiving work, he's still going to be a top 8 running back in fantasy football. So, and that's where he's going. Like, he's going as the running back. I believe he's going as the running back 6 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think that's necessarily overrated, but like, I don't know. I'm not avoiding him because of that.
I mean, at the do people really think that they are going to throw for touchdowns with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett when they have Naji Harris in the backfield?
It would make sense why they do.
They had a worse offensive line last year, and I know it's not a super, improvement on the offensive line this year, but you saw what he did last year with that offensive line.
I'd imagine his efficiency goes up by like 0.3 yards.
Which is perfect.
And that's enough to probably keep him in that like top 7 spot. Again, I don't care. He's going to get the volume, and fantasy is about talent and opportunity. Naji has both. DA dismisses charges against Jerry Jeudy. I wouldn't even worry about his incoming suspension for Jerry Jeudy this year based on the story that's come out. Sounds like there's really not much to worry about in terms of Jerry Jeudy for fantasy this year. David Njoku and the Browns agree on a 4-year, $56.75 million extension. Makes him like isn't it the 4th highest paid tight end in the NFL?
Makes him top 5 for sure.
I think he's the 4th highest paid tight end in the NFL. I hate to tell you, I'm like creeping up on David Njoku for fantasy, but it is nothing that I am excited to draft and have as my starting tight end. He is a mere bench stash or just leave him alone and don't draft him. I think that's all we need to say there.
Yep.
And I'm the guy who likes sleeper tight ends. I'm the guy who loves finding the tight end gems every year.
You are
like
Mr.
David
Chris
Njoku's
Herndon.
on that list, but Chris Herndon till I die. Last piece of news. John Madden officially announced as the Madden 23 cover. Rightfully so. Rest in peace to legend himself, John Madden. They did the right thing. EA did the right thing. They put the man himself on the cover. There's no other way to go about it.
They probably didn't even change anything in the game, but they're just trying to get back in people's good graces by putting John Madden on the cover. But
that's also true. I haven't been too impressed with the yearly updates to the game. I've been very underwhelmed. We're not a gaming podcast, though.
Another talk for another time.
Another talk for another time. Let's move on to our top 15 Dynasty wide receivers. Do you have a sound effect for us? I realize Cameron's been giving you the sound effects, and I haven't been giving you the freedom to express your sound effects.
I've retired the sound effects because it is beyond cringe when you listen back and hear it. So, yeah, no, sorry.
I'm determined this offseason I have a way in which we're going to get transitions and sound effects in here. I'm going to make it happen.
Let's do it.
Top 15 Dynasty wide receivers. Top 15 Dynasty wide receivers. Three fellas here. We went through, ranked our Dynasty wide receivers, and we are coming at you with our top 15 for this season. And we all pretty much have a consensus top 16. I think there's one person that got left off this list, and I was very surprised that he was. But Michael Pitman Jr. didn't quite make the cut. He was at wide receiver 16 for us. So don't go coming at our throats when we don't mention Michael Pittman on this list. But I have to look at our official.
I've got it. If you need it,
you got it. Yeah, where do we all have Michael Pittman at? I feel like I have him right at wide receiver 15.
I've got him at 15. You've got him at 16. Cam has him at 17.
Okay, so he's right on the cusp for us. I think he's the one honorable mention. Any quick honorable mentions that we may have left off that may be like, what in the world? Why would you leave them off? I'm not really concerned about the rookies. The rookies have to earn their spot at this point. I think I have a lot of them like cusp of top 20, if not like right at 19 and 20. But a few of the names that we may have left off.
Mike Evans.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I'm concerned about him with Brady, but we can move on.
Yeah. Terry McLaurin is another one.
Yeah, he's 27, and people don't want to acknowledge that. Continue.
Mike Williams.
Okay, he's a sneaky one, but he's like a Mike Evans. I think I would still rather have Mike Evans over Mike Williams in Dynasty.
And I think, I mean, Cam's the highest on him because you put him at 16, but I feel like you and I, if we went to like 25, Mike Will would have been like 21, 22.
Mike Will would have, yeah. He's just one that I see. Now that I say like I would rather have Mike Evans over Mike Will, I think about like Brady potentially retiring after this year, and then I look like an idiot. It's like, duh, I would rather have Mike Will, who's going to have Justin Herbert throwing in the ball for the next however many years of his contract. Yeah. Those are tough. Those are tough to leave off. But I think what we did is we all of us pretty much prioritized youth over everything else. Youth, talent, and opportunity. Those are the three things you need to take into account for Dynasty. Youth is like the one that you throw in there, and how young or age, I guess is the better word to use there. But I think we prioritized youth specifically in terms of age with a lot of our rankings here for Dynasty, because that's how you need to do it for Dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, I included guys like Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen in my top 20, but they are like 28 and 30 respectively compared to the rookie wide receivers, compared to the Mike Williams of the world.
Yep.
It's the age factor.
Yeah, 100%. And 15, we start with a guy who is still, my goodness, I can't believe he's this young, and he's what? Is this his 5th year in the league now that he's been around?
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy. DJ Moore is our Dynasty wide receiver 15. Cameron and I both have him right at 15. Ty, you have him the highest at 13. That's coming from a guy who was like pretty anti-DJ Moore last season. You're coming around on him. You're coming around on him a bit.
Yeah. Let me quick apologize to Mr. DJ Moore if he's listening. There's no excuse for that. I just got that one wrong.
We all get our takes wrong, and you owned up to it. You're correcting your mistakes. That's the important thing here.
I'm just hoping I'm not overcorrecting, right? That's the one thing I'm hoping for. But
well, what are you overcorrecting for specifically?
See, that's just it.
I shouldn't say 4.
There's not,
but
continue. No, it's not necessarily I'm definitely overcorrecting here. It's just you don't know how fantasy will go. So he could end up not being wide receiver 13 in Dynasty football, right? Like I said, it's fantasy football. You never know until it actually happens. But I digress. DJ Moore, I'm in on him at 13. The man had 163 targets last year. And
he's a volume hog.
Yeah. And Sam Darnold's still his quarterback, but even with Sam Darnold, he had 163 targets and 93 receptions. He didn't really have a touchdown production last year, but those can change at any point. So you take that into account, plus the potential that, hey, I trust Matt Corral a little bit more than I do Sam Darnold. So
I'm willing to make that change at this point.
So whenever that transition happens, it's going to benefit DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, right?
That's a name.
Yeah, all weapons in Carolina are going to benefit from Corral over Darnold.
I would agree, and the beauty of DJ Moore is the experience you have paired with the age. It's not every day you get a 24-year-old wide receiver who's already had 5 years or who's going into his 5th year in the league. It's just not every day you get that. I think about Terry McLaurin versus DJ Moore all the time. This is one that I feel like social media subconsciously debates, and they always side Terry McLaurin. And I'm like, why? I would rather have DJ Moore. DJ Moore just catches 6 touchdowns in a season. He all of a sudden becomes this super solid mid wide receiver 2 instead of this borderline wide receiver 2, right? Where he's the tail end of 22, 24. He's all the way up in probably between 15 and 20 at that point. The touchdowns are going to come. I'm with you. I like DJ Moore. I have no problem with you having him at 13. Our wide receiver 14 for Dynasty. Interesting one, coming into the season injured. Ironically enough, you're the lowest on this guy as of right now, Tyler, maybe because you just traded him away in our Dynasty League. But Mr. Chris Godwin as our wide receiver 14 for Dynasty formats. How much of your ranking takes into account his injury coming into this season and also just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' future in general? What goes into your ranking of outside of the top 15?
That's exactly it.
Okay, that's what I figured.
I think it's more the future than the injury, but the injury certainly plays a part in it. I'll say it. I'm really, really scared for all Buccaneers players after this year when Brady's done.
Yep. Assuming Brady's done, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, that's a good caveat. Assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I am assuming that as well. I am not touching any Tampa Bay Buccaneers unless if their name is Rashad White, but I digress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no. I mean, Kyle Trask is not going to be a great replacement for Tom Brady. I don't think anyone can be a great replacement for Tom Brady.
No.
So
Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Just to name a few, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and they're definitely going to Tampa after this year, right?
Yeah. Especially Mahomes. Are you kidding me?
He wants out. So
he wants out of that contract.
So I do, and you alluded to it earlier, that I used to have Chris Godwin in our Dynasty League, and I traded him away for actually DJ Moore, but
DJ Moore, didn't you?
Well, eventually.
Well, eventually you got DJ Moore out of it. Yeah.
I gained Jerry Jeudy as well out of it. So I got Jeudy.
You got a lot of young wide receivers out of that. Anyways, not important, but
no, he's the volume guy in that offense, but Mike Evans gets just enough volume and so much more touchdowns that Evans finishes better than Godwin. So Godwin's going to consistently finish 12 to 15. And I'm worried for when that new quarterback comes in because that won't be it where he finishes with the new quarterback.
No, it won't be. And I think there is a lot more volatility with all your Tampa Bay Buccaneer assets in the near future. I think Godwin stays inside of the top 15 just because he is younger than Mike Evans. And Chris Godwin, was he 25, 26?
26.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's not quite at that, 28-year-old tipping point yet. And, wide receivers is typically 30, like you said. But even at 28, unless if you're, elite, a Devonte Adams, a Julio Jones, right? Typically 28 is kind of the, tipping point of, you start to see the regression, and then 30 is the fall off. So, yeah, no, I'm with you. I think there's more volatility to Chris Godwin. I could probably honestly have him lower, but I also value winning now, too. And Chris Godwin is a piece when he comes back this year, is going to help you win this year. So Chris Godwin, a wide receiver 14. We have Jalen Waddle then at wide receiver 13. And you and Cameron are both lower on Waddle for Dynasty. You have him at wide receiver 14. I still have him up at wide receiver 11. My faith in Jalen Waddle is merely volume and increased efficiency this year. So obviously his volume is going to go down. He's probably not going to see 140 targets again this year. That's just the reality with Tyreek Hill there. But I think now that there is a Tyreek Hill there, Jalen Waddle's efficiency of his touches will probably go up. And with Mike McDaniel, he's going to get creative. Other thing with Tyreek Hill, he's also aging. Tyreek Hill is no spring chicken. I believe he's 28 now.
I would even say 29.
He's up there, right? So it's not like Tyreek Hill is going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense for the next 3 years. So Jalen Waddle's just sunk, right? I think the change of guard could probably switch sooner rather than later, knowing with how Mike McDaniels probably wants to coach this team. I still have faith in Jalen Waddle. He's in his second year in the league. That's what we need to remember. There is still so much time left on Jalen Waddle. And he looked pretty freaking good his rookie season. Not Jamar Chase. We can't compare these rookie wide receivers to Jamar Chase. Jalen Waddle was top of the crop for the rest of these rookie wide receivers. So I'm still in on Jalen Waddle as a top 12 dynasty wide receiver. His time will come. I actually think he'll probably work fairly well with Tyreek Hill, though I do think Tyreek Hill does not benefit from this situation, but we'll talk about him eventually. Any final thoughts you want to add on that?
I mean, yes, Tyreek Hill is the ultimate weapon that can really kind of put a cloudy kind of outlook for a wide receiver like Jalen Waddle. But we don't know if it's a guarantee that Tyreek Hill is actually going to really work with Tua. But what we do know 100%. Is that Jalen Waddle works well with Tua.
Yep. They already have the year of chemistry together. Not that adding Tyreek to that really mucks it up. They're going through a whole regime change in general, but regardless, Jalen Waddle is a constant there. I still have faith in Jalen Waddle going forward. So Deontay Johnson then comes in at wide receiver 12 in our dynasty rankings. Again, I'm the lowest on Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 14. Here's the thing. I keep trying to talk myself back into Deontay Johnson by reminding myself how good Allen Robinson was with Mitchell Trubisky in Pittsburgh. The thing is, though, the Chicago Bears didn't have the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver room. They didn't have Chase Claypool. They didn't have Pat Freiermuth. They had Trey Burton. Where's he at now? And what was he before he found Mitch Trubisky? He was a nobody. No offense, Trey Burton. Much better football player than I am, but I think we can agree there's very few years of relevance there. So he didn't have Allen Robb, or he didn't have a Chase Claypool. He didn't have a George Pickens. He didn't have a Pat Freiermuth. He didn't I like David Montgomery. He didn't have Naji Harris. Okay, there are so many other receiving weapons in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense that I think I'm willing to hedge my bets on Deontay Johnson finishing lower this season versus him producing another top 12 season. Now, I understand he's still young in a contract year, though, So we don't know where he's going to end up next year. He'll probably re-sign with the Steelers, but they also have Pickens there now. That's the other guy. I think I mentioned Pickens.
Yeah, yep.
But they have Pickens there too. All that to say, there are a lot more weapons to spread the sugar around to in Pittsburgh. And even if it's Kenny Pickett starting, like, I just don't want to trust a rookie wide receiver with a guy who's in a contract year. Like, that to me just doesn't scream good things. That screams like Kenny Pickett trying to probably force him the football and Kenny Pickett still trying to learn. And I don't, bad vibes there. I'm not feeling that. So I'm lower on Deontay Johnson. I have him at wide receiver 14 in Dynasty. I still think he's a top 15 asset. I still think he's someone worth rostering on your team. He still has incredible value. He's insanely talented. I'm just cooling my jets now that Big Ben isn't there anymore. I don't think Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett are going to like force feed him the ball like Ben Roethlisberger did for 150 targets. I just don't see that in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think we have very different quarterbacks in Pittsburgh now than we did for the past 20-some years with Ben Roethlisberger, and especially towards the end. I think what really separates, or what divides people with Deontay Johnson is, one, how they see Deontay Johnson's talent compared to the rest of the receivers on the roster. If you think Chase Claypool and eventually George Pickens are going to be viable options in that offense, or I shouldn't even say viable. If you think they're going to be guys that can take away targets from Deontay Johnson, then understandably you're going to be a little bit lower on him. For me, and I can't speak for Cam, but I know for me, I think Deontay Johnson's tiers above Chase Claypool and as good as George Pickens can be. So I don't have any doubt that he's going, he's not going to get the 150 targets that he would get fed from Big Ben, but he will still get very good volume because he is the wide receiver one in that offense. Yes, they have a run game. That's where they traditionally base their offense off of, but who's going to be the number one option? I'm going to bet it's Deante, and I don't really think Claypool or Pickens are that much of a threat to him.
I think it's just a matter of, like, are you optimistic or pessimistic for this new quarterback change in Pittsburgh? And I don't know if you can necessarily be optimistic, but maybe it's, are you less pessimistic or more pessimistic? And I think everyone's expecting Deontay to take a step down. I think I'm just expecting a bigger step than the crowd, which I'm okay with. I would rather be more conservative on a player than overdraft a player. That's where I lean. So Deontay Johnson's our wide receiver 12 in our Dynasty rankings. At number 11, we have A.J. Brown. And Tyler, you're going to be the middleman here because there are a few rankings in here where Cameron and I have very different perspectives on some players. I have A.J. Brown as my wide receiver 8 in Dynasty still. And I really, as I was ranking them, I really, really tried to not be biased as an A.J. Brown manager in our Dynasty league. I did my best to not be biased, and I think I eliminated as much as I could. I have A.J. Brown as my wide receiver 8 in Dynasty. Cam has him at wide receiver 12. Not that it's like miles apart, but still 4 spots is pretty significant when you look at some of our rankings here. You're the middleman at wide receiver 10. Talk me down a little bit of A.J. Brown, but talk Cameron up a little bit on A.J. Brown, because I don't think he should be outside of the top 10.
Yeah, actually, that's a great way of putting it, because me putting him at 10 is a combination of this year and the future. I would put him higher. I just don't trust the offense in Jalen Hurts. I don't know. Yes, A.J. Brown is a great talent, but having a wide receiver like Devonte Smith, who's already been with Jalen Hurts for a year, in a run-first, run-heavy offense with a mobile quarterback that is more than willing to just run it himself instead of maybe tight, fitting it in a tight window. That's probably the reason why that's probably why I wouldn't go as far to say he's at 8, but I wouldn't go as far down to say he's at 12. Because if we're talking future, like we did with the Buccaneers, and if I don't think Jalen Hurts is the guy going forward, he will get an upgrade at quarterback.
Yep.
So, like I said, 8 was a little too high just because of this year. 12 was a little too low because of what the future is. And it just worked out so perfectly that I was smack dab middle at 10.
I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think there is a part of me that still thinks like Jalen Hurts could totally force feed him the ball and give him like 135 targets. I'll say 140 targets, and then like Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert each only get like 70 targets apiece. Like, I feel like there's a world where that happens, where like Devonta Smith just becomes mincemeat. I don't think that's actually likely, but there is this world in which I believe a bit more in the talent and production of AJ Brown. But I think that's totally fair to say, like, you know what? I need a year first. He's top 10. Give me a bit before I push him up to the top 7, top 8 range. I think that's totally fair. Our wide receiver 10 is actually one of my favorite Dynasty prospects. And maybe not even Dynasty prospects. He's just one of my favorite wide receivers in fantasy right now. T. Higgins. He's just so incredibly fascinating to me. Because I was originally very skeptical on T. Higgins, right? Middle of last season, he really wasn't all that great. But now all of a sudden he's creeping into this like top 13, 14 wide receiver range in redraft. And I think he's very clearly a top 10, top 12 for sure Dynasty prospect. You have him at wide receiver 11, but I have him at 10, Cameron has him at 9. I don't know what's not to love about T. Higgins when you're playing across from arguably the best wide receiver prospect we have seen since Julio Jones in Jamar Chase on the other side of the field, who's taken everybody downfield with him. And then you have T. Higgins, who, correct me if I'm wrong, 6'4", can go up and get one downfield, actually like pretty quick too. He's not like he's a slow guy. He can beat people downfield, right? Like T. Higgins is so exciting, and I think this Bengals offense does take a step forward this season. I don't know if it's necessarily in the passing game, but I think they become more efficient. I think that's only to the benefit of T. Higgins. I'm going to look up his stats from last season of where he ended the season, because that's really what I care about. But I digress. Any thoughts you have to add on T. Higgins? I really love T. Higgins as a wide receiver this year. I think I'm slowly creeping up on him, and he might be one of my favorite targets in drafts. Not only in redraft, but in Dynasty startups too. Yeah,
one thought I have is that he's kind of somewhere between this like Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett type wide receiver where he's not going to be super consistent, but he will have games where he has a huge, huge splash.
Yep.
And I think the reason why we've got him this high, because I think, like, let's say he was like a 4-year, 5-year vet, I think we would put him a little bit lower than 14, 15, or lower towards 14, 15. But I think just because of how well Jamar Chase did last year, we're going to see defenses really kind of like try to contain Jamar Chase this year.
Sure.
And what does that do? Well, that then leaves T. Higgins then on an island against poor CB2 for any given opponent. And T. Higgins, he's good enough to be a wide receiver 1 in any other offense. He's just behind Jamar Chase in this offense. So all that to say, I think that's why we've got him right at 10, just because he's still relatively young in gaining experience. He's in a blossoming offense that went to the Super Bowl last year and was super productive and efficient through the air. And teams are going to pay a little more attention to Jamar Chase, and that just opens it up for him.
I definitely agree. T. Higgins from week 5 on last season, wide receiver 14. He was injured weeks 3 and 4. So after his injury last season, he was the wide receiver 14. After his bye week, wide receiver 10. I'm in on T. Higgins this year. I love him as a Dynasty prospect. And redraft player too, at any rate. Let's cruise through the rest of our top 10 pretty quickly here. Again, Tyler, I'm just going to have you be the middleman. We know Cameron is pushing a very, very heavy DK Metcalf agenda. And it kind of collapsed when they traded Russ, but he's still holding on to it in Dynasty. He's got DK Metcalf ranked as wide receiver 6 in Dynasty. I have DK all the way down at wide receiver 12. You, again, are the perfect middleman at wide receiver 9. So talk me up why DK Metcalf is still a top 10 Dynasty wide receiver, but talk Cameron down that he's more of a borderline top 10 Dynasty wide receiver.
This is A.J. Brown just inversed.
It really is.
It really, really is. I think there is intrigue for DK Metcalf this year just because he is by far the biggest and probably and is the best target in that Seattle offense that Geno Smith, even when Geno Smith played last year, he looked DK Metcalf's way a lot. Drew Lock is obviously going to try and get the ball to DK Metcalf because he's going to trust a bigger body more. That being said, we're talking about Geno Smith and Drew Lock.
Yes.
So, and not even, and that's just the quarterbacks. They also have 3 starting caliber running backs that they may kind of interchange at some point this year with Chris Carson, Kenneth Walker, and Rashad Penny.
Yeah.
So that's my reason for coming back down a little bit from 6. But my reason for not having him all the way at, 12. Sorry, excuse me.
You're good.
They're going to get a better quarterback.
They have to at some point, right?
I mean, it's Baker Mayfield, apparently, according to some anonymous beat writer.
Baker Mayfield.
No, but there will be improvements at quarterback going forward. Maybe you had to suffer a little bit this year, but years going forward, he's going to have better quarterbacks that will get him the ball. I think here's the other thing. Pretty sure he has a contract expiring this year, so he's in a contract year this year, I think.
I believe he is, yes.
So that'll be interesting. I'd be shocked if Seattle let him go.
I'd be shocked too.
But that's just something to keep an eye on for sure.
Who's more likely to get Bryce Young in the NFL draft? Seattle Seahawks or Atlanta Falcons? Basically, who's going to have the worst record next year?
I'm going to say Atlanta just because Seattle, for whatever reason, refused to commit to a rebuild, and so they've still got
Yeah.
I don't get it, but Atlanta will.
I don't either. I agree with that. Let's cruise through some of these guys here. The next four players. No, yeah, 4 players. Next 4 players are interesting. And I'm going to ask you an interesting question here. Wide receiver 8 is Tyreek Hill. Wide receiver 7 is Devonte Adams. Wide receiver 6 is Debo Samuel. Wide receiver 5 is Stephon Diggs. We have 3 guys who are over the age of 28 inside of our top 8, and then Debo Samuel. So how, when you get to this point of ranking Dynasty wide receivers, how in the world do you manage these Tyreek Hills, these elite guys who are nearing the end? How do you even begin to rank these players? But yet you get a guy like Debo Samuel who's 25 and sneaks his way in there after one historic season after not really producing much his first 2 years in the league. So you get to this point where I think it's fair. All these other guys aren't elite yet. Yet is the key word. I think if DK Metcalf still had Russell Wilson, I think he'd slide into this category, but without Russ, he falls outside. This is when we get to the point where these are your top 8 most talented wide receivers in the NFL. Not most talented, but for fantasy, these are guys you want on your roster. But age is a factor in Dynasty. How in the world do you even begin to rank these players or even consider ranking them for Dynasty?
Yeah, so I think, how do I explain this? It's the Derrick Henry question for these wide receivers. Because a fall off is going to happen at some point. But when is that actually going to happen? And do you try to benefit, for the couple last years that they have of true wide receiver one elite production?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like there's no good way. I feel like you then all of a sudden have to flip your mind back to, like, who do I want now? Like, who am I going to rank ahead of who now? And then I think, like, another year or two of relevance probably makes the difference. And contracts. I feel like contracts comes into play with these guys, too. Because a guy like Devonte Adams who just signed, like, was he a 3-year, 4-year extension? Whatever his extension was, right? Like, Diggs has a 3-year extension. Right, all of a sudden, like, I feel good about Diggs because he's on contract for 3 more years, and he's likely to produce with Josh Allen for 3 years. I feel like you're looking at situations, contracts, and ages much more carefully than you are, like, a Jalen Waddle versus a Terry McLaurin. I am taking Jalen Waddle over Terry McLaurin 10 out of 10 times in Dynasty. You don't have to tell me twice about that. But I feel like with these guys, you look more closely at situation and contract. Is that fair to say? At least that's how I look at it. I start to look at it that way because if a guy like, I guess Tyreek Hill just got a new deal too. All these wide receivers just got new deals.
Yeah, I think we've officially entered the territory of the wide receivers that are playing at their, I shouldn't say their ceilings, but like they don't have anything left to prove. Is that fair to say?
Sorry. Repeat that. I got distracted, and I thought you were going to add something onto that, and then I just froze. So that was really awkward.
Viewers, listeners, our deepest.
I'll just cut it.
No, what I was saying was that these guys don't have anything left to prove.
Right.
T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle, they all still have something to prove. Tyreek, Devonte, Debo's probably like the one guy that doesn't really fit this scenario, but
Youth and potential talent. Dude was a top 5 wide receiver last year, and he's 25 years old. I think he has to be in the top 7 somewhere.
Yes, exactly. And then Stephon Diggs, right? They specifically Tyreek, Devonte, and Stephon Diggs. They don't have anything left to prove. You know what you're getting with those guys. Tyreek, maybe, and who knows, just because it's a new team. But with an extension, that is a sign that, hey, we want to get you involved.
Yes.
So at that point, it's really just kind of a, like, pick your flavor kind of, I guess, because you could look at
I agree.
You could look at Devonte Adams and still be like, he's still got a serviceable quarterback, and he's by and far the wide receiver one on that team now. Or you look at Stephon Diggs and you're like, right, he's playing with Josh Allen for the rest of his career.
Yeah. It is really a pick your flavor. Who do you like the best out of that bunch? I agree. And again, I think Debo Samuel cracks top 7 because he is 25 and just came off a crazy efficient season. You can't ignore that. Top 4, CeeDee Lamb, no real surprise there. 23 has a chance to get 150 plus targets this year, something we've been waiting for forever. I think I'm drooling over the opportunity there. This is where Cooper Kupp comes into play now. We have Cooper Kupp all the way up at number 3. And to make a summary statement, just because we are nearing the end of the episode here, just to make a summary statement, is it fair to say because of his historic season, any kind of regression that could come for Cooper Kupp would still probably make him a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy football this year?
Absolutely.
I think that's enough said there, and I would even argue he probably has another 2 years left in the tank, and you could have 2 years of the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football with the volume that he gets, the efficiency he gets, the way Matthew Stafford was targeting him. I mean, I think we'd be crazy to not have Cooper Kupp. I have him at wide receiver 4, but that's just because I like the potential of CeeDee Lamb with Dak now, with no Amari Cooper. I leaned youth there with the upside of potential volume. I think that's all we need to say there. Last 2 really should be obvious. I don't even want to spend time talking about them. We have Jamar Chase at number 2 and Justin Jefferson at number 1. If they aren't your number 1 and 2 dynasty wide receivers, what are you doing? Justin Jefferson going into his 3rd year has already set rookie records. Jamar Chase has broken Justin Jefferson's rookie season records. I don't know what you want. They are the 2 best wide receivers drafted in the past 2 years, 3 years, I guess. Justin Jefferson was 3 years ago already, but if you include this year's draft prospects. They are the 2 best youth wide receivers in fantasy football, hands down. They are the top 2 dynasty prospects. Amen. Close the book.
Yeah, I mean, they have everything that you're looking for in a dynasty wide receiver. They have age, they have production, they have opportunity. They have all of it. Enough said.
Yeah. Youth, opportunity, and talent. They have all 3. They hit the trifecta. Not much more we need to say. So, that wraps up another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Just to run through them one more time. Top 15 dynasty wide receivers for the Fantasy Football Fellas. DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Jalen Waddle, Deontay Johnson, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, Devonte Adams, Debo Samuel, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, going from 15 to 1, respectively. Any final thoughts you have to close out the podcast?
Get well soon, Cam.
Get well soon. He's actually sick. I don't know if we actually said that.
No,
I think
we
just
didn't.
made a ton of jokes and it just went on with the podcast. Cameron, we love you. We're sorry. Get well soon. If you want to send Cameron a get well card, you can just shoot us a DM. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas, Facebook, YouTube, and the good old TikTok. We're knocking on the door of 45,000 followers on TikTok.
Yes, sir.
Let's hit 50K soon. Like, I know 45 is a nice number. Let's hit 50K soon. I'm shooting for 50K. I'm looking forward to it. We are back next week with 2 episodes a week until the start of the NFL season. We are ready to bring you all sorts of awesome content and guests this off season. Tyler, scale of 1 to 10, how stoked are you?
50.
I'll one up you. 51. Let's do it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. We're normally 3 Stooges being dudes, but it's just Lucas and Tyler hanging out with you tonight. Just a couple of Stooges being dudes. Fantasy Football Fellas. We'll see y'all next week. Deuces.
Deuces.